your support by heading to patreon.com. Hey guys, thank you for checking out this episode. We'd love your support by heading to patreon.com/freshly grounded. It really does make a difference in helping us continue making this content. And if not, no stress. Enjoy. Assalamu alaikum guys, welcome to Freshly Grounded. Alhamdulillah, as you guys will see, we're on a completely different set today, and it's not going to be the norm, but as you guys would have seen by now, we've just released the advert for our Freshly Grounded game, which it has all been released now, which is available if you go to freshlygrounded.com/the game, and the links for all of that will be in the description. But what's happening right now as we speak in real time is we're actually filming the advert for the game. So the advert that you would have now seen, it's kind of like Inception. I'm talking about the advert that you would have seen. We're recording it right now, and so we had a podcast in the middle of it that I'm so excited about, and so I just threw the camera up during the advert and shoved everyone out of the room, and I was like, we've got to do this episode. So this episode is with brother Sulaiman Jenkins. I'm sure a lot of you guys will be familiar with his work, at least his most recent book that he just authored and just actually got a publishing deal with, which I'm really excited to talk to him about as well. And he's been very generous with his time. Guys, before we get to the episode, just to mention that the mosque in Kilburn, Qalam Education Centre, again, they've been shut since the pandemic happened due to it being just in a really bad condition. They want to fix up the masjid and also like extend the prayer space so that we can double the amount of people praying in there, and as well as that they can bring their 150 Quran students back, because those Quran students haven't been able to have a class since before the pandemic. You can support that project by going to the links in the description, and everything is there, inshallah. So without any further ado, we'll get into the episode.
And welcome to Freshly Grounded, the brand new podcast by best friends Faisal and Sam.
Huh?
I said welcome to Freshly Grounded,
No, after that bit.
the brand new podcast
And after that bit?
by best friends Faisal and Sam.
Really?
Okay, let's bring brother Sulaiman into the room. Assalamu alaikum, brother Sulaiman, how are you doing?
Alaikum salam. How you doing, bro? How's everything?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very, very well. Where are we speaking to you from right now? We're in London. Whereabouts are you?
You're speaking to me from Dhahran, Saudi Arabia.
Oh, amazing. Allahu Akbar. How is it? How is the weather out there?
It's cool, man. It's hot, you know. Obviously, Saudi is hot. We're by the water, so it's a bit humid sometimes too. But it's cool, man.
Sure.
It's cool. It's starting to cool down a little bit.
Alhamdulillah. Well, listen, Sulaiman, I think you know, we know a lot more about you than you probably know about us. And
Sure.
so, first of all, I want to say a huge congratulations, and we'll kind of go into that in a second. But we really have seen kind of your stuff online, your posts, and someone who we see as someone who's so inspiring to the younger generation as what we should be doing and where our priorities should be at. I know you speak a lot about where your priorities should be at as a person, and where we should seek our inspiration from. And I'm really intrigued to get into that. But before we do, as I mentioned to you earlier, we're on this set and we're just doing the advert for our brand new game, and so it only makes sense that because we've never met before that we break the ice with the game. How does that sound?
Sure. Sounds good, man.
So essentially what it is we've had just under 200 conversations at Freshly Grounded with amazing people like yourself, and so what we wanted to do is we wanted to hand the conversation over to the audience, and so we've created a deck of cards that has about 76 conversation starters that hopefully allow you to have like a deeper, more meaningful connection with your loved ones, whether it's a spouse, a parent, a child, or friends, or in this case strangers. And so the idea, if you look at I'll show you the rules of the card. You might be able to see there. I'm not sure if you can see it properly, but the rules are only two: be vulnerable and don't judge.
Sure, cool.
Fine. So I'm gonna randomize it, and I'm gonna get a card, and then we'll get started, and hopefully we'll get to know each other a bit better.
Bring it on.
Okay.
I'm an open book.
Amazing. The question says, name one thing you love about the way you've been raised.
One thing I love about the way I've been raised, I would say, is just dealing with adversity. That is something that's really seen me through a lot of tough times, and also it's given me just basically the confidence to know that even if you hit, difficult times or rough patches, you have the resilience to make it through, and there is success after hardship. And that is something that not only in my personal life, but I can use it to obviously apply to the deen. Living life is it's not easy. It's difficult at times. To try to stay on the right path as much as we can, inshallah. But we know that, inshallah, all of the hardships, whatever hardships that you endure now, there will be reward, inshallah, in the hereafter. So, I would say that dealing with adversity was something that was really monumental in, my formation as a child.
Amazing. See, I think that a lot of people in, I suppose, like the older generations, and I'm not talking about yourself when I mention the older generations, but I mean, like when we do speak to like uncles and older brothers and older sisters, they often say that it's that the dealing with the hardship that's lost now in this generation, in like my generation and the generations below that, we've become a bit soft to like and sensitive to things that perhaps in the older generation people just had to deal with things. Do you feel the same?
I wouldn't say necessarily softer. I mean, challenges are different, based on the generation. But I think, I think life has become easier in general, just with technology and things like that. So some of the things that, people had to deal with back then, they don't have to deal with now. So life has become easier. There are different challenges, but I would say in general, life was more difficult back then, and as you progress in advance in technology and stuff like that, life gets easier in many ways. Presents different challenges, but yeah, I think life is a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I think that the fact that we have access to everything now at our fingertips almost makes us complacent, because when we don't now have access to something, it's like, why can't I get it in the touch of what? There was a trailer of this comedian that I saw, and he was making a joke saying that everything's become like right now, like Amazon was Amazon Prime, and then it became Amazon Prime next day, and now it's Amazon Prime same day, and now they've got Amazon Prime now. I want it right now. And he was saying that like it's going to get to the point where you go to a restaurant and like before you even thought about what you want to order, you want the food to be in your mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah, subhanAllah. It's very true, subhanAllah. Okay, one of the cards says, one of Allah's names translates to your protecting friend. Name a time in your life where you felt that name in existence.
That's a good question. There have been times when I've been in near accidents, and I mean, clear, either it was my fault. I mean, clear it was my fault, in these cases sometimes. And yeah, I mean, you just feel like, wow, subhanAllah, that was Allah. There's no way. My time wasn't written, and that could have been pretty bad, but mashallah, Allah saved me, because sometimes you just you lose control. One time, for instance, actually, my wife was pregnant with my first son, and I was driving in the street on one side of the lane, and for whatever reason, the tires were bad, so and we went over a water patch, and this car just skid and went out of control, jumped the divider, went into the other side of the road. Alhamdulillah, there was no oncoming traffic. The other traffic was still stuck at the light.
Subhanallah.
So, had the traffic been coming, it would have been done. It's finished, you know what I mean? And I was finally able to gain control, and we landed in the parking lot of a masjid. I said, subhanallah.
Allah
I said, subhanallah, mashallah. So that was, I would say that was definitely a time when you're like, mashallah, Allah has protected me, or protected us from this situation.
How many children do you have now?
I have 5.
Allahu Akbar, Allahumma barik, may Allah bless them. What advice could you give me as a first-time dad, someone who's got, I've got a 9-month-old boy, Zakaria, and I'm very new to the fatherhood life. What would be your kind of top advice for me?
I would say enjoy it, enjoy them while they're young. One of the things for me is that the more kids that I have, the more patient I become. Or I have become, it was kind of difficult for me in the beginning to just deal with all the crying and the neediness and things like that. As Americans, I'm sure it's British too, but as Americans, we're really, really just, self-dependent people, So when I had my first son, I was 23, and I just wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to the neediness. I wasn't, but as you get older and more experienced, you realize that they have no protection or any way to handle themselves except through you. So being patient with that, enjoying the time too, because they grow up so fast. For me, the most beautiful time for a child is from 6 months up to a year and a half, 2 years. They're just really sweet, and it's just a great experience. Just enjoy the ride. Don't rush anything, and really just try to soak in all the moments.
Yeah, I remember, like, at the beginning, I would say to my wife that all he's doing is sleeping and eating and then back to sleep. And I said, I can't wait for the moments where he's like, comes running up to me and give me a cuddle. And she said what you said. She said, let's just enjoy him while he's like this, because he's also never going to be like this. And we can actually take advantage of the fact that he sleeps like 20 hours of a 24-hour day. We can actually get on with things and stuff.
Exactly. Too, in children specifically, it's really, you really see the Ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's just amazing how the stages that a human being goes through it, that child that came out of the womb, and then within a year, he or she is walking, laughing, playing. It's unbelievable how that in 1 year, just a span of 12 months, how much it's unbelievable. They go from not knowing anything, not being able to do anything for themselves, to walking. It's really amazing. It's really amazing. It's an amazing process.
It's such a strong reminder. Okay, let's go with let's do 2 more cards and then we'll get into conversation, inshallah. I think I generally imagine that this chat is going to be a lot like this, because we could have gone down 2 routes and like heard your story, which is amazing, or like I could take advantage of the fact that I'm on a call with you and have like a wise older brother chat. And I've decided for the latter because I think that will benefit so many of our listeners as well.
No problem. I'm not that old, man. Just 38.
30, but older brother. I didn't say uncle. Don't worry.
It's all good. It's all good. Just joking.
Okay. Okay, this is a good one. Tell me an Islamic reminder you once heard that has stayed with you to this day.
Don't be angry.
Wow. Don't
be angry. It's anger is from the shaitan. It's not a cool thing, and a lot of harm can be done in anger, angry moments, and the one especially with talking and speech, actions, any action or any speech. The thing about it is that once it's done or once it's said, you can never take it back. So sometimes people do things or say things in times of anger that they wish they would never have done, and if you hadn't gotten angry in the first place, or let your emotions get to that level, then perhaps you wouldn't have and so the prophet, the man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he repeated 3 times, which means quite an emphasis on don't be angry. So I would say that's a pretty powerful reminder.
There's not many things in life that when somebody tells you something, you can remember exactly where you were when you heard it. And that specific hadith that you mentioned, I remember exactly where I was when I first heard it. And I was I was going up the stairs. I remember the step I was on in my university library, and I was listening to this lecture in my AirPods, and I had heard the hadith for the first time. Like you said, the man said, like, Ya Rasulullah, any advice, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said la taghdab, and he said, yeah, but like more advice, and he just repeated, like you said 3 times, la taghdab, and you think to yourself, subhanallah, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that point could have given any advice, and it was the advice of not getting angry, which shows, especially someone like me who I can let my emotions get to myself, it shows the importance of how much like that's the root of many problems.
Exactly. Same here. I've learned to, in my younger days, I was a lot, more, riled up and things like that, especially, coming from Brooklyn and things like that, where it's kind of rough and you kind of have to be on edge, all the time. But I've really learned to just chill out, man. Just calm, especially with kids and just life, just learn to chill out. A lot of things that you might get upset about, you realize in the end, it wasn't worth it anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. You always realize that it wasn't worth it. Always.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go with this question. Who is your biggest cheerleader?
My biggest cheerleader is my family. My family, hands down. Family, my wife and kids. when I was writing the book, they kept asking questions, when is it going to be finished? When is it going to be finished? Some of my kids would actually sit down and say, okay, Baba, you're writing your book. I want to write mine too. And they would show me, like, they would try to be with me during the same process. They're really excited about that and all accomplishments, mashallah. So yeah, I would say that. And then my mom, she's probably the biggest. She's just always in my corner. So mashallah, shout outs to moms.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the book, because
Yeah.
it's very recently taken a bit of a turn, hasn't it? We've been
Yeah.
keeping an eye on it on social media and stuff,
Mashallah.
and so talk to us about it. Like, how long did it take for you to write? How did the connection happen? And then yeah, we'd love to hear also about kind of the most recent change or events that's been really positive as well. So let's maybe start at the beginning, and I'll leave it to you.
Sure. So, how did I meet Mutah? Mutah and I, we met. Well, let's actually take it before that. A lot of people wouldn't know, but when I was I was born Muslim, but I wasn't always practicing. I started to practice again when I was about 21. But up until that time, I was a big, huge fan of Tupac and the Outlaws. So I used to listen to Tupac all the time, and the Outlaws, and Mutah was my favorite one.
Really, your favorite one? Wow.
Yes, hilarious. So fast forward to 2002, I returned back to religion. He accepted Islam 2003. I went to NYU to get my master's degree, finished it in 2004, came to Saudi in 2004. He came to Saudi, I think, 2005, 2006. I came to Riyadh in 2008. He was in Riyadh. We met through a mutual friend. So we had the same friend, very good, close friend of ours. And I was like, wow, Mutah? I was like, yeah, that's my man. I was like, okay, mashallah. And he's like, you want to meet him? I'm like, yeah, sure, no, why not? So we met, and it's amazing, that I meet him as a brother. He just seemed like just a regular dude, mashallah, a brother. So my first interaction with him was as a brother in Islam, and that was really amazing for me. But at the same time, we were sitting down and having dinner. The restaurant was El Chico. We was having Mexican food. And he's there talking about Tupac and talking about Suge Knight. And I'm like, wow, this dude, this is really Napoleon, in front of me. And I was like, wow, mashallah, so we exchanged numbers afterwards. I didn't let him know I was a huge fan of his, because, I don't want to, this is, he left that life. So, I wasn't really blowing him up like that. So we maintained contact over the years, and we recently got like much closer. I'd say like maybe it was 2015, 2016. It just happened like that, on Eid we would give salams, and I would call him, from time to time. But I was leaving my job, and no, it was actually 2017. And, I had a bit of extra money. At the same time, he was doing his clothing company. So I told him, look, the clothing company it's 33. The name of it is 33. And I said, it's pretty interesting. How about I, invest? And he's like, sure, no problem. So we talked about it. So I became a business partner of his. And so we had a connection like that through business. And then, so our relationship developed, we got closer. And then his documentary came out last year, 2019, in early 2019. And one of the comments, it was very well done. One of the comments in the comment section was, we're waiting for your book to come out. And, not for nothing, but mashallah, I'm an academic first and foremost. I teach English here. I'm a professor. I've been very fortunate to publish, articles based on, racism, based on discrimination, based on monolingualism. There are a lot of different, aspects of English language that I've been able to publish. And I've been able to publish, mashallah, in, pretty prestigious journals, related to or connected with Oxford University Press, which is, the acceptance rate is like 10%. So I told him, dude, I'm an author, I'm a writer. So why don't I write your autobiography, or why don't I write your biography? He was like, sure. He had one that was done before previously, but the quality really wasn't, I read it, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair, for the attempt, but it just, for me, it didn't do Mutah justice. So basically I told him, like, look, if I showed him some of my writings. He's like, mashallah, this is, mashallah, this is serious. And then I said, Mutah, I'm not going to, as an academic, I'm not just going to talk about your life, because yes, your life is his life is extremely intriguing, inspirational, tragic. There's so many lessons to learn. But I said that in and of itself is powerful. But I said what's going to be even more powerful is if we have intersectionality not only with your life, but very important things that were going on. One, in the black community at the time that your life is going on. Number two, in hip hop or rap culture. Number three, in society as a whole. Looking at things like police brutality. He had serious mental health issues. This is something that's sort of been hype for, something that's disdained, in the black community, maybe in other communities as well. Alcohol abuse, substance abuse, things like that, So I said, Mutah, I'm going to look at all of these issues if you allow me. And he said, sure, man. He said, no problem, man. I trust you. You're an academic. And I said, yeah. And the other thing is I'm going to make sure that everything is referenced. Because as an academic, first and foremost, you can't write anything without having sources that you're pulling information from to make your argument or make your claim credible. So we went through the first chapter. I produced it, showed it to him. He's like, mashallah, man, we're on to something. Let's get it cracking. So I was able to work on it seriously from December of this year and finished it by April. So literally it was about 4 months of just nonstop working. Bro, I'm talking about 9-10 hours a day. I have a job, alhamdulillah, but the job, it's not really that taxing. So I had a lot of extra time, after I, finished my regular, official duties. And I would just be in a coffee shop, just writing, man, just writing, showing him, what I'm writing, going back and forth. Because the thing is, too, is that the approach that I took was, it was going to be, for me, his voice was critical in the book, to have him, him give firsthand accounts about things that are happening. And then I would go behind him and just sort of, write a narrative, write a story. And then any part of the story that I can cross-reference from a newspaper, or a magazine article, or a book, or a first-hand interview with many of the people. We interviewed tons of people, Steve Lobel, Young Noble, tons of people. So all of the information in there is cross-referenced. You can go to any other source and find the same information. So it was important for me to have his voice and for the information to be cross-referenced, because, whenever you write a piece of literature, a text, that text has to stand the test of time. Mm-hmm. Once it's out, you can't bring it back. Just like talking, just like speaking, just like doing actions. Once you put it out, you can't take it back. So it has to stand the test of time, meaning 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, somebody reads this, they have to have the same, I want them to have the same feeling, and I want them to also, feel like, look, this book was put together very well. And if it's put together very well by things that can be cross-referenced, and that's just, just adds to the value of the book. So that's what we did. The book ended up being 16 chapters, mashallah. It's about almost 300 pages. So, I also wanted to make it short but sweet. 300 is that's kind of like the sweet, point where it's enough, but it's not too much, where people can be, oh my gosh, that book is huge. I'm not, and, inshallah, it's really, I hope it's really, interesting. The reviews we've gotten so far have been, overwhelmingly positive. There are 150 sources, man. The reference section in the back is about 14 pages alone of just magazine articles, like I said, books, newspapers, firsthand accounts, YouTube, videos, documentaries. From those 150 sources, there are about 260 reference points, different points in the book where, you okay, this happened, and then there's a reference to it. So, mashallah, I think, the idea is that the book will reach all different audiences, people who are looking for self-help, people who are Tupac fans, Muslims who are looking for his, how did he come to this point, people who are interested in substance abuse and overcoming that, people just interested in an American story, people interested in a Western story of entrepreneurship, or rags to riches, or overcoming obstacles and things like that. But also, I also wanted it to be ultimately an academic text. So the idea and the hope is that this book can be taught in universities, and a professor will be able to look at the book and say, this is very well documented. I can use this for a course. There are courses that are taught about Nas. There are courses that are taught about Tupac. So I hope that this story will, somebody will find it interesting enough and intriguing enough to use it, either to supplement those courses or to have its own standalone course. So that was the whole idea. behind every book.
How do you mentally break down such a large task? So when you're looking at the life of Mutah Beale, you're understanding that there's such a vast amount of experiences that he's gone through, and you're now
Right,
having to bring that into a book and obviously take key parts. But
right,
for that's relatable to any task. Like the general person who wakes up in the morning and they have so much on their plate and they just want to crumble. How do you
right,
break such a big thing down to then actually get started and then see it
right,
through?
right. That's an excellent question. I've been very fortunate, to have sort of like administrative positions in the jobs that I've had. So part of that has been, for instance, if I'm planning for the semester, I'm planning for 30 teachers, or I was a writing supervisor in one university, and I was responsible for all the campuses all over the country, so 3 different branches. So when you're responsible when you have that level of responsibility, you can't function, you can't be successful unless you plan. You have to plan, you have to break things down methodically, right? So I've been used to doing that. So when it came to his book, I said, Mutah, we have a book, but we have to start, we have to start step by step. So the first thing we need to do is we need to examine what kind of themes we're going to have throughout the book. So we laid out the themes: police brutality, his grandma, meeting Pac, the outlaws, their effect on him, his experience in the music industry, his experience, after the music industry, coming to Islam, death. Death was a huge theme. So we broke that down first into themes, and then based on the themes, and I was like, okay, so what I'm going to do now is based on these themes. Now I want you to tell me what are the important stories, and just walk me through your life. So we would literally go from, unfortunately, the unfortunate murder of his parents at 3 years old. That was a very important, obviously, point. That was a starting point. And then from there, we just walked, throughout his life. And from that, we had tons of stories. And then basically it just became a time of synthesis. So which of these stories, we couldn't obviously fit everything in, and which of these stories was relevant to the themes that we were trying to promote throughout the story. So that broke down things even further. And then after a while, after I wrote, I would write, and then basically the chapter would sort of take on the life of itself. So by the time I finish a chapter, or by the time I finish, it's like, okay, that chapter, when I go back through it, it was, around this sort of general topic. And so that's how we came with the name of each chapter. And that's basically how we proceeded throughout the whole thing. Sometimes a chapter would be too long and we'd have to break it down into two, because there was just too much stuff going on and things like that. So it was really, really basically like walk through his life, from his life, pick all the stories that were relevant, and then, basically just, cut it down. So because of that, man, wallahi, for me, honestly, as an author, and I don't, obviously you don't, brag, and you don't, praise yourself and things like that. But for me, every time I read the book, for me as an author, I'm engaged from first page to the end. And that's because we chose the stories carefully, so that literally every story has a message. Every story has a point. There are so many stories that we couldn't include because he had so many, And then also as an author, the book is actually almost 90,000 words. I literally chose every single word carefully. I kid you not, every single word carefully, so that there's not one wasted sentence, one wasted word, one wasted paragraph. The reader, inshallah, hopefully from point A to point Z, will have, hopefully an enjoyable experience, and nothing is lost, and that's just a reflection of his life. His life from that time until now has just been an open book of just unbelievable stories, so hopefully the reader will come away with that. It was a long process, but it was, it was an enjoyable process at the same time.
You mentioned that despite having so many experiences in his life and having to actually cut a lot of those down, and they didn't end up making the book, it was still important to you that alongside that journey of telling his story, that you also kept up to date with the timeline of Black history, and that
Exactly.
seems to be a common theme in all of your social presence online.
Yeah.
Why is that important to you, and is that something that's also a theme in your academic work as well as your online presence?
The chronology is not so much important in academic. When it's academics, is more presented an argument, and that argument has to be substantiated with previous literature and things like that. So the chronology isn't so much the same with academia, but the idea that you bring events or you talk about events and then you support that with something that is verified out there, wherever it is, that is important. So for instance, I didn't want it to be a book where people will accuse myself and Mutah, okay, that's just Mutah's opinion of things, right? So for instance, the time when he snatched the microphone from Puffy, anytime he came up with these stories, I would go and search on the internet. Napoleon snatched his mic from Puffy. Sure enough, I would find that story in New York Post, LA Times, reputable places. I'm like, okay, this is excellent because this is his firsthand account of what's going on, and now I can back that up with something that is found on the internet. The other thing is that his life intersects with very, very critical things that happen. He was born in a time when rap came onto the scene. Like there was no rap pretty much before him. So he's one of the pioneers of rap. Queen Latifah, he grew up with her, and she became a pioneer for females in rap. So there's this historical element to his life that is historical, not just because it's related to his life, but related to common history in terms of black culture or rap history. Obviously, the East Coast West Coast feud between Tupac and Biggie is a huge issue, not just for hip hop and rap and stuff like that, but also for the black community. Gang violence, things like that. Those are also huge issues. Rodney King, police brutality, that happened roughly at the same time that actually I think it happened a year before Tupac had his own run-ins with police brutality. So police brutality was something that, and not only that, believe it or not, even back in 1967, the town of Newark, New Jersey, they had huge riots, okay? And these riots fundamentally changed the Newark that we know today. Because of these riots, all basically the white people left the town, made it destitute, and has never recovered until now. The reason for those riots was police brutality, because the police officer beat up a black cab driver, all the way from 1967, right? So all of these things, I wanted to be clear that, look, this issue of police brutality is not something that is new. It's something that's old and historical. So again, all these little themes, whenever there was, anything that I was able to relate, chronologically, I would put in the, book related to police brutality and related to historical things that affected Black America or hip hop, and rap culture.
You mentioned that like a great idea, a great kind of showcase of academic writing is when it stands the test of time, and it reminds me of I've mentioned this so many times on the podcast, but it reminds me of this book that I just read, which is a very popular book, and I'm so late to the party, but How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and that book was written in 1936. I was shocked when I found that out. And honestly, in 2020, every line of that book is still relevant. And you think they didn't have the technology that they had, and you don't know if the guy was just a genius at writing. So this is something that I thought to myself, but I hadn't spoken to anybody about it. And then I sent that book as a recommendation to a friend of mine who we often like sending book recommendations to each other. And the first thing he said to me was, I'm shocked that the book was written in 1936 because it's all relevant. So to think that book to this day is a bestseller, and that Audible didn't even exist back then, yet it's like one of the most downloaded books on Audible, shows how important it is, like you said, to have a piece of writing that can be relatable no matter, regardless of whether society and technology changes throughout the ages.
Exactly. And I mean, honestly, man, by the time the book was finished, I wanted the book to have a spirit of its own, to have a life of its own where, anybody who reads it, they will be able to relate, not only now, but hopefully, in years to come. This is a fundamental, at the end of the day, this is fundamentally a human story. Mutah and myself, we happen to be black, we happen to be Muslims, upon the sunnah, inshallah, but his story anybody can relate to it if you're a human being, So that was the idea. And if that's the case, if we wrote it in such a way that anybody can have access to it, you don't necessarily have to be Black or Muslim to be able to relate to the story. And if that's the case, then we hope that that is going to resonate, with a tremendous amount of people, and hopefully for the foreseeable future.
So let's talk, before we round up, let's talk a bit about what the future is like for Sulaiman Jenkins. As you mentioned, you're very young in age, 38 years old. You have a whole life ahead of you, inshallah. May Allah give you good in this life and the next, and a long life. What's on the horizon?
Well, mashallah, we didn't get a chance to talk about, the fact that we had been talking to a publishing company for about 3 months, and I won't mention who it was, but we had dealt with them for about 3 months. The manuscript was with them. We turned down, quite a few other offers, and at the end of the day, they said that their priorities shifted and they weren't able to publish anything for the rest of the year. So we're like, okay, fine, but everybody has been, we've been releasing excerpts. Everybody is pumped up to read it. So Mutah and I said, look, why don't we just publish it ourselves? We and it's not difficult. It's the age of entrepreneurship, and it's relatively easy to do that. And so we wanted to publish it on electronic platform and audiobook first, and then release the print versions, relatively, sooner after that. But one of the guys, Professor Ibrahim, who I had reached out to, and I know him through another Saudi gentleman named Dr. Uthman Bernawi. He was interested from the very beginning, and we sort of just said, let's hold off and let's see what's out there. And basically, when things sort of fell through, we said, okay, and we need to revisit this. Right away, he was like, yeah, let's do it, because he's a foremost professor in hip hop, which is something very rare. Yeah, to have a professor of hip hop and how hip hop affects African and Black cultures. He's from Canada, but he's actually invited as a professor in Dubai. Wow. Prolific writer, tons of books, tons of articles. The guy he's unbelievable, mashallah. So he said, yeah, right away. He said, without any, review, in-depth review, he already knew, he already had the manuscript, we were able to secure a deal basically in the 11th hour. And now everything is official. We signed, mashallah, our contract yesterday.
I saw it yesterday while you put it in your story.
Alhamdulillah. So everything is ready to go, So a bit of my future is actually dependent on the success, hopefully, of the book. If the book is, as successful as we anticipate it to be, that will allow me to sort of branch out and do the same thing for other people, most likely celebrities. So I've actually reached out to BG Knockout, and BG Knockout and myself and Mutah, we've talked about, he's actually Muslim. Same sort of thing, had a crazy life. Actually went to jail for 10 years for attempted murder, things like that. So that would be an intriguing story. I've been approached by a number of other people about, different stories. I myself have my own story, that I like to tell, about, how I got to this point in life. But another thing that I'm very passionate about, and if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know, is that, I'm very passionate about this issue of discrimination and racism in English language teaching. So, and that's actually more of a challenge than Mutah's book, because academic writing is really not, number one, it's not creative, it's not really, and it's very rigorous, and you're very limited in what you can do. So you really have no space for basically creativity. So the challenge is much more difficult. And then, people are much, professors at high levels, they scrutinize your work much more, much more. So, but this issue is very important to me. So I would actually probably say that that's the next project on, upcoming, is to write an academic book that's purely academic, and hopefully have it published, with the likes of Oxford or Cambridge, or, some prestigious publishing houses in America, because the issue is, it's important and it affects people's lives. So I have a few of those sort of projects, lined up. We hope, hopefully, inshallah, we hope, with Mutah's context and things like that, hopefully the book can be turned into a docuseries, a movie, things like that, with Netflix, something like that. But, hopefully those are the kind of things that we anticipate in the next few months.
You know the thing you mentioned about discrimination and racism in the English academia and English teaching.
English language.
English language teaching. It sounds so interesting to me because I think so. Obviously, so I think there's been like a spike or a second spike here in the UK. In like the last few days of an awareness of like systematic discrimination and systematic racism, but we could probably even call it like discrimination on many fronts in regards to kind of racism being one of them, but like the areas that people live in and stuff, and I'll tell you why. So I don't know if you've seen it but in the UK it's been trending over the like past week and stuff. So every year obviously the people who finish college, they get certain amount of results, and those results are called your A levels, right?
Right, sure.
And your A levels are what determine you going to university to study a degree. And so if you want to get to a good university, you have to have great A level results. And if you want to go to university in general, you have to have A level results. You can't, for the most part, you can't go to uni without doing your A levels, right? For the most part.
Right.
And so they're like the integral, like the most important results that a person gets in their life, because it can determine your career and stuff like that. And so because of the pandemic, there haven't been any exams, and therefore there's been like a new way this year that they've determined these results. So the original plan, so from what I can remember, the original plan, and I might be wrong here, was that the teachers predicted grades and your mock results would kind of come into play, and you would get a result that's based on your previous results and what you predict by your teachers who know you, right? And then what happened is recently they decided to change that to take that into account, but also the exam board themselves put together an algorithm which gives you a result. Okay. Now, what that's done is this algorithm.
I can already see it's going.
Right. So before I tell you what the algorithm did, I'll tell you what ended up happening when everybody got their results. So I know a brother, for example, from a area that's probably not. It's like more of a council estate area, which I suppose just translates like more of like a government housing and that kind of stuff kind of area, as opposed to like private housing and stuff. And so and he all of his life has got A's and B's. And he got his A-level results, and he got B, C, D. And he was looking to study like economics in like a top uni, and he would have got the results, inshallah, to do that. And he got a B, C, D, which is completely doesn't align with any of the results he's had since he started education. And there's many stories like that. And so there was this huge uproar. And so then people looked into the algorithm and why is it that there's such a huge issue here. And what we saw was that also people from affluent areas who go to affluent schools, and those tend to be the schools that kind of are not in like they're more like in the suburbs and stuff like that. They got generally a much higher result. So we can see that this algorithm had a massive systematic discrimination. There was and inevitably with discrimination comes discrimination of all types, including racism. And so then in the UK, the public have had such an uproar that the government has just U-turned the entire results and said, okay, we're gonna look at it again, because it's just changed everyone around. But what it's done is it's exposed this systematic discrimination that exists, that I suppose you kind of know of, but it's always a bit of a conspiracy theory, and now it's come out like it's legit.
Exactly.
So I'm intrigued by the teachings of the English language having relation to that, which I believe, but I've never heard of.
Right. I mean, the thing is that, and I'll go to that in just a bit, but yeah, Trump, there's sort of like, with Obama, generally with Obama and Bush, there's always been racism, in America. There's always been an undercurrent of, racist tendencies, but it was sort of pushed to the side under the umbrella of being PC, right? That all changed once Trump came to power. Once Trump came to power, and he's really just an idiot in terms of just an idiot. He's a New Yorker, unfortunately. He's an embarrassment to New York. I'm from New York. He's an embarrassment. He might as well be, born in Tennessee or, somewhere down south where hillbillies live, because his rhetoric is just so divisive, and he basically brought all that stuff out. He brought it to the surface. So it was always there, but it took his presidency to bring it out to the surface. So the same thing with the UK, I'm sure, and different countries are different in terms of where they are in stages of racism, stuff like that. But a lot of times you find that there are these sort of hidden, I wouldn't say agendas, but there are these hidden factors that are at play that you sense, but you can't really put your finger on it, and it takes these kind of things for those kind of things to come out. In terms of English language teaching, I used to work on Wall Street, and I was going to get a job to work on Wall Street at a relatively young age. When I was about 20. This is going to go in my book, inshallah. But I left it because I got disenchanted with the lifestyle. It was just really gross. Talk about gluttony and having access to every single thing. Everything is cutthroat. You have to work 60 hours, 70 hours a week. I'm 20 years old. It's like, dude, come on, man. I'm not a slave to money, and that's basically what you are. So I left that, and I said, well, what am I going to do now? Because I built up my whole life to that. And I said, somebody suggested, I wanted to go to Saudi Arabia. Somebody suggested that I teach English. So I ended up going to NYU to teach English. I thought English language teaching, wallahi, was going to be one of the safest jobs that you can possibly. What can be more difficult than teaching English? I'm an English speaker, this and that. Well, boys are wrong. When I started to apply to jobs, and especially jobs like in the Middle East, I was questioned about. Well, there's this issue of native speaker versus non-native speaker. Okay, which is now that English is a global language. You have countries and societies that they grow up speaking English, right? So what is the definition of a native speaker then? If somebody grows up from birth, like a Filipino or Nigerian, they grow up from birth speaking English alongside their original language. So how are they not native if they speak English from birth? The definition of a native speaker is speaking a language from birth. So you have this dichotomy of native speaker versus non-native speaker. So when I would give them my application, and I'm from the U.S., they would question, are you really a native speaker or not? I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Are you really, what does that mean? I'm from America. At that point, I hadn't left America. I never left America. Yeah, I've been in America my entire life. What do you mean, are you a native speaker or not? Well, we want to know if you're originally there or did you. So from the very beginning, I'm like, time out. What's going on here? Why is it that there's this emphasis on being native or not? And then it came out that, or I was quickly able to assume that native speaker. I don't look like a native speaker. When they say native speaker, they mean someone who is, Caucasian, and not not necessarily Muslim, So. And that absolutely, for me as an academic, having been fortunate to go to the schools I went to, been very fortunate to learn English at a very high level. And I have, I think I have, and my students hopefully can back me up. I hope I have important linguistic tools to impart to them. I would hate for that to be stymied because someone doesn't perceive me as a native speaker, right? Based on skin color, based on name, based on religion, based on whatever. And not only that, but you have this issue affect millions of people all over the world. You have so many qualified people, Arabs, Russians, Italians, all over the world who love English, love being English teachers, but they're denied employment because the company specifies we want a native speaker only. Dude, if that's not your modern day Jim Crow, discrimination laws on the books, I don't know what is. If you can deny somebody employment based on them being a native speaker or not, dude, what's going on here? So I think that's highly unacceptable. It's 2020. There's no, and not only that, but it's just a false idea that in order to be a competent teacher in the language, that you have to be from America or Canada. It's just not true. If somebody wants to internalize British norms, British culture, then yes, I would say learn English from a British person. If you are learning English for functionality just to get a better job, and you'll never go to Britain, you'll never go to America, you'll never go to Canada, it doesn't matter who's teaching you the English language because you're only learning the language. You're not necessarily going to the culture. So there's an idea that when the language like English expands well beyond its regional boundaries, there's no more attachment to the original culture because the person doesn't need to necessarily go to that culture to interact with them. So this idea that you have to have a native speaker, it really makes no sense. And it's used, you have this, like we talked about, this undercurrent. It's used really to discriminate. A person doesn't like black people, doesn't like Asian people, doesn't like whatever, can say, okay, you're not a native speaker, you don't get the job. Right. And that's.
Yeah,
so I'm very passionate.
And understandably so, we have some amazing Arabic teachers here in the UK, and a lot of them learnt Arabic here in the UK, and they're teaching in the UK, so they never, and they're not Arabs, right? But we learn so much from them, and they're like masters of the Arabic language, which is so beautiful, and Arabic history and the history of our religion and stuff like that. So,
can you imagine somebody saying, "I don't want to learn Arabic from you because you're not Arab. You're not from Saudi. You're not from Sudan. You're not from Syria. I don't want to." It doesn't make any sense.
We'd miss out on such an amazing generational knowledge of the language. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Subhanallah.
And not only that, but there's also the theory that somebody who's from you, who went through the process of learning Arabic, and he speaks your original language, he would be able to help you with key things that an Arabic speaker wouldn't, because he doesn't know your language. And he's just teaching you from his perspective, So in many cases, what they call non-native speakers of English are more equipped in the classroom to help their learners better than native speaker, So
they've been there.
It's very important.
Yeah. Subhanallah.
Yep.
Sulaiman, I'm sorry I took up more of your time than originally expected. I really appreciate you dedicating time to us, and I hope that we can stay in touch. I recently deactivated my personal Instagram, so I know I've been interacting with you through the Freshly Guarded one, but I'll put my number on this chat here, and then we can stay in touch, inshallah. And thank you so much, like I said, and all the best with everything that you have going on. May Allah increase you in khair and put barakah in the book.
Ameen. I'll make sure to send you an autographed copy, you and myself and Mutah. Make sure
that'll be the word.
Just give me your address, inshallah.
We'll do it, inshallah. I'm going to message you on the chat now.
Inshallah.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.